Yeah, I'll just start recording. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for your time to join us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. We are still waiting for some of our participants to come in. So please do bear with us. And thank you for joining today's convening. But I think as we wait, I can start maybe doing some introductions about our convening for today. So colleagues, again, thank you so much for being here. I hope we are expecting to be joined by our colleagues later on, but for the interest of time, let's just start the convening. I thank you again for being here. So the high level meeting is a meeting that decides the future of the HIV response. And in moments like this, it is the presence and the leadership of people living with HIV are always important. We are showing up because our voices, our experiences, and our lived realities have shaped every major gain or every major progress in the HIV movement. We stand in the solidarity of all communities, of all key populations, and at the same time, we have to gently remind ourselves that people living with HIV are not a subgroup within this movement. We are equals. We're on equal footing with all the communities, and our leadership has always been the political and moral center of the HIV response. We have to also remind ourselves that the movement or the HIV movement is at its best and effective when every community leads from its own lived experience. A movement with multiple centers of leadership is more resilient, more democratic, and more effective. We are always calling for unity, especially at this high-level meeting, because there are differing priorities across the community. But unity does not mean uniformity. It means respecting the distinct strengths, the distinct histories, and the distinct contributions of each community, including the community of people living with HIV. As we prepare for the high-level meeting, let us stay focused on what truly matters. This is not about networks. This is not about politics. It's not about organizations. This is about the lives, the human rights, and the future of people living with HIV everywhere. And no one else can speak on our experience on our behalf but us. We show up to the global agenda with clarity and purpose. I hope after this convening we are clear and we have a purpose. We show up because our communities deserve nothing less. We show up because our community is unapologetically PLHIV led. Now, before we proceed with the discussions, I'd like to get a sense of where we are at. Let me just. So if you have your phone ready, I'd like you to join us in our poll, like our small poll. So if you can go to your phone, and you can, or if you're in your laptop, you can go to www.menti.com and enter the code 82438662. Okay. We have 10 people. We have 11. We are 30 here. Once we reach 15, we can proceed with the poll. 3 more. Okay. 2 more. I need 2 more. 13 is not a nice number. Okay, no one will join. Okay, 1 more. Okay, 15. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so this poll is more of like assessing where we are at in terms of our understanding, in terms of our expectations for the high-level meeting. This is not an assessment of age, but the first question is this your first time engaging the HLM process? Oh, we have 19 people. Okay. So majority, like this is this is the first time in engaging in the high level meeting process. So the 7 people who have responded no, um, good, good for you. Okay. Let's not wait for the other name, for the rest to respond. Let's go next. Let's go to the next question. Describe your awareness of the HLM 2026 and its processes. You can type a word, 2 words. Describe your aware, just like, what comes into your mind when we say HLM 2026, what how is your awareness? You can describe. You can type in any word. Complicated, intense, PLHIV funding, too aware and anxious, complex, limited. Yeah. So we're gearing more on the not so positive feelings. Moving fast, not a clue. Okay, yeah, yeah, that's understandable. Fear, mixed, um, limited, commitment, complicated, moving fast, high level meeting. Okay. Anyone else who wants to add in words? Not a clue. Tough, divisive. Divisive. That's interesting. Divisive. Okay. Complex, intense. Okay. Very complex. Okay. Scary. I think we're getting words which are synonymous. Complex, intense. We have scary. We have anxiety. Moving fast stuff. Okay. Um, Moving forward, for people living with HIV, what should be our priorities for high-level meeting? Sustenance, rights, securing treatment access. Treatment, please. Treatment, please. Sustainability, engage involvement, treatment, securing treatment, integrated person-centered. I think this is person-centered care. Okay, we're seeing a lot of sustainability. We're seeing a lot of treatment, funding, sustainability and funding, GIPA, treatment and prevention. Okay, involvement, engagement. We're seeing pediatric and adolescents. Okay, that's nice. Treatment and prevention, treatment, community-oriented leader. Okay, key populations. Okay, uh, uh, sus- universal health coverage, women. Right. But I think the largest one is sustainability. Okay, community action. Nice. Okay, so thank you for your responses. We will be so for this PLHIV convening, we are going to have two segments. The first one will be information. We will have our colleagues from NCD Alliance to share the HLM 2026 toolkit, and we will have our colleagues from UNAIDS to share the updates, the recent updates on high level meeting. And the second segment of this PLHIV convening is a consultation with our PLHIV communities and PLHIV leaders, where we will be dissecting, or we will be kind of like diving deeper into the PLHIV priorities for the high level meeting. But at least now we know that some of us, this is the first time. This is your first time joining the high level meeting, and for some of us, this is not the first time. And it's good to have that exchange of the new experience and the previous experience. Moving forward, thank you so much for your participation. Moving forward, let us now call the GNP Plus Co-Executive Director, Florence Riaco Anam, to set the scene for today's convening.
Thanks, Inad. And thanks to everyone on this call. I'm seeing a lot of very familiar names and people I haven't seen in a while and lack the ability to show my how excited I am beyond just smiling on this screen. Thank you, Inad, for setting us off very well, and to all our partners, and to UNAIDS specifically and NCD Alliance for agreeing to join us on this important call. This is exciting for me particularly because this is our 23rd PLHIV Leadership Virtual Meeting today. At the start of this virtual convenings was our intention to bring us all together so that we have a coordinated effort towards influencing the global AIDS strategy and the high-level meeting. We wanted to start early to sort of get us all excited about this particular Global AIDS Strategy 2026-2031 and the high-level meeting 2026, because it matters to us that we are here. Many of us, depending on when you got tested or when you got into this world as a person living with HIV, some of us were given timelines for which we were meant to be here, and some of us are sitting here and are not even meant to be here, but also for the magnitude of what this is. This is the final 5 years of the global targets of the SGDs. There was a timeline with commitments to end AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. And back then, in 2015, when all this was being organized and these indicators coming up, I don't think many of us thought we would find ourselves in the last 5. We are sort of like in the last mile. If you're a Kenyan like me and you understand the marathon, you know the last 5 kilometers are usually the ones that matter the most. It's when you do the sprint. It's when you pull up all the energy in you to get to the end. You're tired, of course. You've been pacing and doing it, especially if it's like a 20-kilometer run. I say this not as a runner, but someone who just watches the matches. I still haven't mastered the art to run away, even from my problems. Today, as Inad said, we will do 3 things. We will get an update of the high-level meeting process, as many of you have been reaching out to GNP Plus to understand what's going on. I'm grateful that Vinay and Mulea, and thank you, Vinay, I know it's very early in the morning, your time, for joining us today to inform and hear from us. At the end of last year, GNP Plus collaborated with our partner, the NCD Alliance, to develop the high-level meeting 2026 advocacy toolkit. They are coming in with strong knowledge and experience, just having concluded on the leadership of the high-level meeting in 2025 on NCDs, where they have understood the structure as it has evolved and within the new political environment we exist in. This toolkit has a focus on integrated HIV, NCDs, and mental health services. And so we will hear from dear Leslie today about the toolkit and what opportunities are for us to use it in the HLM and other opportunities at country level, particularly with the GC8 applications happening. And then we will share some key messages that we are hoping will inform the HLM 2026 on behalf of people living with HIV. We've picked from all of the conversations we've been having, right from the start of the virtual webinars to the in-person meetings we've been having. I recall in the Living 2024, serious ask to GNP Plus to do exactly this, bring us together, highlight and spotlight the unique needs of people living with HIV within the HIV response, even as the response emerges as the space to address many other issues and as an opportunity for integrating and stronger health system. A little bit about the position we are taking today. We are in a different political climate, both negatively and positively. GNP Plus was one of the 2 co-conveners with UNAIDS of the community and people living with HIV engagements at the high-level meeting in 2021. We find that there are some great positions around the political declaration in 2021. We would love to strengthen those. We have strong political declaration and statements around the integration of services, security of HIV treatment, across a course of life, including aging and for children. There are strong indicators for different issues. There is the affirmation of U equals U already existing in that document, among others. We would love to strengthen those, but to use the one thing that will give us the opportunity to do that better, which is the just concluded and launched new global AIDS strategy under the leadership of UNAIDS. So Cedric will share more about what we are looking at, but the idea is to zero in on what is really critically important for all people living with HIV. As the political climate change remains fragile, we want to build on these statements to make stronger language for 2026 and focus on the HIV response and its transitions as we see them adapting in funding and resources. But for many of us who do not even have the honor or the privilege to engage with this service, with these platforms, only get to witness this when we go to our health service provider. At GNP Plus, we believe the ambition of HIV epidemic control is possible. We know we have the scientific opportunities currently and some in the pipeline in the near future. We also know that to be successful in the HIV response, we must commit to preventing advanced HIV disease and stop AIDS deaths. And particularly, we must be powerful in using the community language on U equals U to double down on stigma, motivate testing, motivate treatment and adherence, and also influence and impact HIV prevention. We must double down on prevention to end new infections. It is the only way we can all say that we have all collectively worked towards a successful HIV response now and into the future. I welcome you today. I hope that we will continue to collaborate not only within the HLM 2026 period, but beyond this, and wishing you a good meeting. Thank you, and back to you, Inad.
Thank you so much, Florence. Let me just... thank you so much, Florence, for highlighting the PLHIV leadership at the high-level meeting. Without further ado, let's go straight to what we have worked last year. We are here with Leslie Odendal from the NCD Alliance to share the HIV NCD toolkit for the 2026 high-level meeting on HIV and AIDS. Leslie, I'll just share the screen.
Great. Thank you so much, Inad, and to Florence for your leadership. And thank you so much to GNP Plus for the invitation. I'm really honored as someone living with HIV. Next week, I will have been living with HIV for 24 years. So I'm very happy to be at this convening and to be presenting this toolkit. I have... Perhaps I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Leslie Oedendal, pronouns she, her, and I am a consultant for the NCD Alliance, which is the Non-Communicable Disease Alliance. And we produced and launched in March this toolkit on HIV and NCD priorities for the HLM. I have popped the links in the chat, so feel free to go to the links and download the toolkit if you'd like to follow along. Next slide, please, Inad. So today, the way that I've structured this talk is a little bit different to how the toolkit is structured. I will first start with what are the advocacy opportunities for PLHIV in the HLM, and then I will go to some of the key messages around non-communicable disease and HIV integration for the HLM. I think the way that this toolkit has been structured is that we hope that it will be useful to colleagues, regardless of what it is that you're advocating for. Because we have an advocacy timeline in there, although timelines have shifted a little bit. So please rely on what Vinay outlines or what's outlined on my slide as things have shifted. But most importantly, we believe that the advocacy tools and templates can be adjusted to whatever it is that your priorities are as PLHIV and as we will discuss towards the end of this convening. But in terms of the toolkit, for those of you who have opened it, you will see that it starts with key facts and evidence around the need for HIV and NCD and mental health integration. Then we have our key advocacy messages, which I'll go through at the end of my presentation. Then we have the advocacy timeline, and very importantly, the advocacy tools and templates that you can adjust for your context. We have advocacy letters to policymakers. We have a template for a media opinion piece. We have a stakeholder mapping tool, messaging guidance that you can adapt for different audiences. And there's actually a number of other tools in there as well that we can go through as we proceed. Next slide, please. So in terms of the timeline of the political opportunities for the HLM, we, as I mentioned, things change as decisions are made in New York and elsewhere. But essentially where we are right now, and again, I'll leave it to Vinay after this to clarify if any of this is incorrect. But where we are right now is that we are at the stage of the co-chairs, which are the government of Botswana and Georgia, are busy negotiating what is called the modalities resolution. Now, the modalities resolution is what outlines for member states and civil society and other stakeholders who will be involved, what the dates are, how the meeting will be run, what kind of panels there will be, and when the multi-stakeholder hearing will be held. Where we currently stand is that last week, version 2 of the modalities resolution, usually, member states have their discussions and revisions are made, and then that kind of final draft is circulated amongst member states. And then you have something which is called the silence period. And essentially, it's a period, like it's a deadline by which member states, if they keep quiet, it means that they've accepted what is in the modalities resolution. What has happened is that a number of member states broke the silence on Friday and broke the silence over the weekend. And some of the issues that were raised were, there were issues around the proposed dates. Some member states didn't want it to be held in June. They rather wanted it to be held in December. Some member states had concerns around civil society participation. And some member states had issues around how much the modalities resolution referenced previous political declarations. And I think that is something that we as PLHIV need to look out for, because we fought very hard for the previous political declaration and we want to build on that success. So we await to see, and Vinay, I'm sure, will give us an update as to when, where things stand currently and when the new modalities resolution will be adopted. The other aspect that has happened is that the multi-stakeholder task team has been formed. The multi-stakeholder task team is the team that is appointed, made up of civil society, communities, private sector, and they represent different groups according to the kind of stakeholders in the PLHIV movement. So we're talking about members of the PCB NGO delegation. We're talking about young people living with HIV. We're talking about the different key populations. We're talking about a representative on NCDs and HIV and others, and maybe Cedric will say more to us. And I believe that task force membership will be announced sometime this week, perhaps early next week. One of the kind of key functions of the multi-stakeholder task team is to come up with a civil society declaration. And this is a declaration of our joint priorities and needs that we are calling for. So it's really important that we've convened today as PLHIV and that we're coming up with what some of those key priorities will be. And that declaration will, basically be the backbone of what it is we're calling for. Then what will happen is in May, on May 14th, the multi-stakeholder hearing will be held. Currently, it will be held in hybrid form. The meeting will be in New York and online. And if you would like to register to make an intervention from the floor, I have popped the link in the chat. And registration is due before the 29th of April. So please do, as PLHIV, we want to have as many speakers from the floor there. So please do make sure that you register, that you share the opportunity with your colleagues, and that as many of you as possible are there. What will happen then is that the Secretary General writes a report based on the multi-stakeholder hearing and inputs from the member states. And from there, a zero draft of the political declaration is released. Based on this is when the political declaration negotiations will happen in May and early June amongst member states. And then the actual HLM, the tentative date right now, as I mentioned, it might change from the negotiations around the modalities resolution, is on the 22nd and the 23rd of June in New York. So as you can imagine, as PLHIV, some of us have concerns around this because we know that traveling to the US at the moment is extremely difficult to get visas. Those of us who do get visas may have trouble with the immigration authorities, especially for key populations. So those are just some of the concerns. Next slide, please. So what you will see in the toolkit is what we've done is for each of these key moments on the left, in the middle column, we have outlined what are different tactics that you may want to use. So for example, leading up to, in the second row, leading up to the multi-stakeholder hearing, we want to make sure that we're applying so that we can speak from the floor. We want to make sure that we're submitting statements with clear and concrete recommendations, that we're coordinating, and that we're using media before and after the hearing. Again, also when it comes to the Secretary General's report and the zero draft, this is a really important time to do a rapid review and analyze what is in the zero draft. Do that as quick as you can within 1 to 2 days, remembering that you'll already be clear on what your priorities are. And so you'll be able to check whether they're in there. And from there, you can suggest edits. You can mobilize regional blocks. You can mobilize your member states and coordinate your messaging across movements. So, yeah, please go to the next slide. Let me just check. I'm not sure. Thanks, Inad. Yeah, so as you can see in this document, there's all the different key moments. We've also color-coded it. So your orange is your priority advocacy moment, such as obviously the political declaration negotiations. Then the green is your advocacy opportunities. And your gray is, an ongoing process. So, for example, here we have, in May to June, when the negotiations are going on, this is when we're doing our global, regional, and national advocacy push. It's when we want to be organized to make sure that we're targeting UN missions. We're holding regional webinars. we're doing national media outreach, we're sharing our lived experience, and we're starting to work on our accountability plans. I won't go through each and every section, but please do go to the toolkit and see what those political moments are. And also to highlight that not every organization will be able to participate in each and every moment. So you as an organization either need to work in partnership or feed into GNP Plus or prioritize what is the key moment that you will be advocating around. Next slide, please. So who are these decision makers that we need to engage in the different levels of the HLM process? At national level, each of us in our countries, remembering that this is a member state, our member states are all part of these negotiations. You have your ministries of foreign affairs, ministries of health, ministries of finance, your national HIV focal points, and your UNAIDS country offices. They matter the most when it comes to early position setting, national consultations, and making sure that your national positions are being transmitted to those permanent missions in New York. Then you also have regional blocks, such as the African Union, the Southern African Development Community, depending on where it is that you're located, and as well as the UNAIDS regional support teams. So this group is very important when it comes to consolidating the regional positions before and during the preparation of the zero draft, and for influencing countries in the negotiations. Then at the global level in New York, this is a very important stakeholder. It's your permanent missions to the UN and the co-facilitators. As I mentioned, the co-facilitators are Botswana and Georgia, and they are the ones that develop the zero draft and that host and are engaged in the line-by-line negotiations of the political declaration. So it's very important that you understand who those permanent mission staff are in your country and start influencing them. And then there's also at Geneva level, you also have permanent missions in Geneva, you have WHO and the UNAIDS Secretariat. So, because they're the ones that are doing the technical guidance and framing. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on. Next slide, please. So one thing to keep in mind is that as you have seen, there are different decision makers at different levels, and they will all have different priorities that are important to them. So in the toolkit, what we have done is we have mapped the different actors, and we have shown how you might want to tailor your message to different audiences. Keeping in mind, for example, that your Ministry of Health, what might be important to them around health outcomes, universal health care, etc., might be different to what's important to your Ministry of Finance, who is thinking more about costing, sustainability, efficiency, etc. So what we have done there is for each of the kind of topics that you might want to address, we've shown how you can tailor the message to those different audiences. Next, please. Now to go to the advocacy tools and templates. As I mentioned, we have a number of advocacy tools and templates. The first being, and very important, is your stakeholder mapping. As I mentioned earlier, you have different stakeholders, and what we've done is we've outlined who the stakeholders might be, what their role is in the HLM process, and what advocacy entry points you might have, and what their level of influence is. And what you can do is copy this table, and in the last column, you can outline who are the key people in your context that you would want to target based on whichever stakeholders it is that you want to target. We've also created a template for writing a policy brief. Whatever it is that your key priorities are, you could adapt it to write the policy brief. There's a template letter to governments or UN missions. There's a template email for requesting a meeting with your permanent representatives. There's a template for a media opinion piece, and also the social media toolkit. Next slide, please. So you'll also see in the toolkit, there is a social media toolkit where we have different tiles and messages that you may want to download. These are specific to non-communicable disease and HIV integration, but they can also give you a good example of if you have other priorities of how you could make them look or make the messaging look so that you can adapt them to what your priorities are. Next slide, please. So that outlines some of the advocacy entry points. And I just want to finish the presentation by briefly advocating for why, as PLHIV, we need to also advocate for NCD and HIV and mental health integration into this HLM. And I think many of us may know some of these facts because many of us are living with HIV as well as NCDs or mental health conditions. So in terms of why it's important is firstly, people living with HIV are aging. And this has increased the rates of hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease and cancers in people living with HIV. And we're seeing that people living with HIV are up to 2 times higher, have higher risk of cardiovascular disease. They have higher risk of hypertension, as well as higher risk of cervical cancer. And I think very important when it comes to mental health condition integration is that mental health is central to HIV treatment outcomes. Depression and other mental health conditions affect 30 to 40% of people living with HIV and directly impacts adherence, retention in care, and viral suppression and mortality. Also, we know that integration is more sustainable. Many of you mentioned sustainability. And most importantly, it's, for a person living with HIV, it provides person-centered care because you receive all of your health needs in one place. Next slide, please. So you will also see that we have created 7 key messages that you may want to highlight. And in the interest of time, I will go through them rather quickly. The first is that, as I've already mentioned, HIV, NCDs, and mental health conditions are interlinked. And we cannot end AIDS or realize the right to health without addressing all of the above. The second one that many people may not know is that in the 2021 political declaration, there was a commitment that 90% of people living with HIV should have access to the prevention, screening, and treatment of non-communicable disease, including mental health conditions. And of course, we want to see that this is retained in the new political declaration. Thirdly, sustainable responses to HIV, non-communicable disease, and mental health depend on strong primary health care and resilient health systems. Of course, central to this is the integration with that when we have integration, we have rights and the meaningful involvement of people with lived experience of HIV and NCDs and mental health conditions at the center. Next slide, please. Number 5 is around going from global commitments to national plans and budgets. I think all of us have seen that perhaps from the last political or the 2021 political declaration that it hasn't necessarily translated into national plans and budgets, and we want to make sure that it does. We need to, when it comes to reforms in the system and in the global health architecture, I think a lot of us have been part of conversations about, like changes in the global health architecture. And for us, everything that happens in that space must support integrated country-led responses to all health priorities, including HIV, non-communicable diseases, and mental health. And then lastly, many of you raised this, but we need sustainable financing for integrated people-centered care. Next slide, please. So those are the 7 key messages. At the link that I shared and will share again, you will see that we have the recording of the launch to our toolkit where, we had more time. And so more details were discussed there. Florence also spoke there. We had someone, Patricia Asera Ocheng, who many of you know from Kenya. She shared her lived experience of living with HIV and NCDs. You'll also see in the toolkit that we have some stories like that. And you'll also see there's a brief with the key messages as well as the toolkit. And I think as my final message, it's don't forget to apply to be able to make an intervention from the floor, whether it's virtual or if you're able to go to New York at the multi-stakeholder hearing on the 14th of May. And thank you again to GNP+. Perhaps I'll quickly add that this resource and toolkit was not only developed by the NCD Alliance, it was also developed in partnership and a great leadership from the Global Network of People Living with HIV, as well as the NGO delegation to UNAIDS PCB, Stop AIDS, the International AIDS Society, PATH, United for Global Mental Health, Youth Lead, and a number of NCD Alliance. So we tried to make it a consultative process with a lot of buy-in from everyone. Thank you so much, and back to you, Inad. You're on mute, Inad.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the toolkit. Thank you for highlighting the political opportunities for engagements, especially for people living with HIV. For sharing the key messages. So Leslie has shared the link where we can access the toolkit and also the link for the registration. But we will be sending this information again later after the PLHIV convening. Thank you so much, Leslie. If you have any questions about the toolkit, please feel free to use the chat box or use the Q&A box or raise your hand. Leslie and Mina are here to answer your questions. Now, we will proceed with the, thank you, Lois. We will be having the Q&A after Vinay, but please stay tuned. Now we are going to have our colleague from UNAIDS, Vinay Saldanha, the Director of US Liaison Office from UNAIDS, to share some insights. What are the recent updates on HLM 2026? Vinay, how are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Wonderful to join you. I don't know why I look a little bit blurry on the screen. It must be too early here in New York, but it really is a huge, sincere honor and pleasure to be seeing friends and colleagues from around the world, from the global GNP network. GNP is not just a partner for UNAIDS. GNP is why UNAIDS exists. And if there has been any progress that has been made in the last 30 years in the global HIV response, it's really thanks to GNP and thanks to the advocacy, the leadership, the uncompromising engagement of people living with HIV and affected by HIV and key populations that have been at the forefront of the HIV response. And that was actually, even for me personally, seen so beautifully in the opening of today's dialogue. I mean, the opening comments that you made, Inad, Florence, how you set the scene, Leslie, how you not only presented an advocacy toolkit, but actually went through all the different components of the high-level meeting much better than I will. So please don't. I hope you're not expecting a lot more from me, because I think it's the core pieces have been covered with extreme sophistication, knowledge, and a real focus on what needs to be done very urgently and in a really smart, coordinated manner over the next few weeks between now and the high level meeting. So a real hats off to the amazing leadership from the team at GNP Plus. And as we have always worked hand in hand with GNP, we will continue to work very intensively with GNP over the next few days and weeks in the lead up to the high level meeting. I took special note, Inad, the Menti poll that you did, that many members of the GNP community are feeling that this process is rushed, that they don't have enough information on it. So please, let's not consider today's dialogue as the only opportunity to engage on these issues. Our inboxes, our WhatsApp numbers, our Zoom calls are open, and we will be staying in very, very close contact over the next few days and weeks, because there is a lot of work to do, and it is an intensive schedule to get from here to the high level meeting. So let me, if I may, just share my screen and cover a couple of quick slides. Are you seeing that on the screen? Okay, great.
Yes.
So wonderful. So I'll be very quick, and I think perhaps your precious time on this call is best used not listening to my presentation for a long time, particularly because I think Leslie has covered already so many of the key elements. So I'll be very, very short, cover some of the things that Leslie's already done, but really put a very political lens on where we're at in the process, what are the opportunities for engagement, and how we expect the timeline to move forward over the next few weeks, and then save a little bit more time for the Q&A discussion. And I'll stay on as long as it's useful for everyone on the call, and as long as I'm welcome. If you need to discuss UNAIDS or anything without me, I'm happy to drop off at any point. But I'll happy to take any questions or comments in the Q&A. So we have the upcoming 2026 high-level meeting on HIV and AIDS, and I think it's important to remember that high-level meetings on AIDS, not only are they quite unique in the global HIV response and in global health, but they have really set a standard for how the UN General Assembly and how the international community comes together specifically on the issue of the global HIV response once in 5 years. So it started with the special session on HIV and AIDS in 2001. And then since then, 2006, 2011, 2016, 2020, 21, there has been a UN General Assembly mandated high-level meeting on HIV and AIDS that happens every 5 years. And as Florence has, beautifully put out in the beginning of this dialogue, this may be the last high-level meeting. That doesn't mean that AIDS is over. That doesn't mean that there is not still massive amounts of work to do. But the ambitious target of ending AIDS as a public health threat was agreed on by member states as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that specific target under SDG 3.3 to end AIDS by 2030 is what exactly this particular high-level meeting is supposed to be convening about, to take stock as to whether the targets and the commitments that were made by member states in 2021 in the last high-level meeting political declaration have been achieved, as the world achieved the progress that was committed to in 2021. And some of those targets, of course, we're all very familiar with. They're the targets around 95, 95, 95. Florence mentioned the importance of U equals U for the first time ever in a political declaration, specifically mentioning U equals U. But there's a lot of other precious language, and I won't make a whole presentation about the language that Florence highlighted is so important to maintain and hopefully even build on in the 2026 political declaration. But language around explicitly referencing key populations, explicitly referencing not just community-based, but community-led interventions and programs and services, explicitly mentioning the 10-10-10 targets, the 30-60-80 targets. So there's so much language, and I won't go through a whole presentation today. We can share as a reference the 2021 political declaration. But here, what I wanted to really highlight is that it's not a given that any of the commitments that were made in 2021, only 5 years ago, will be maintained in 2026. And it's not like, member states here in New York just come together once in 5 years, check a box, and recommit to the commitments that were made 5 years ago. Each one of those commitments that were made 5 years ago was intensely negotiated by member states here in New York. And it's a very different process than what we had last year with the development of the Global AIDS Strategy. In the Global AIDS Strategy, that document, and special thanks to everyone online and GNP Plus for being an amazing partner in all the steps of the process of the development of the Global AIDS Strategy last year. And there were literally thousands of engagements and inputs that went into the strategy. But the actual text of the Global AIDS Strategy was largely written by the team at UNAIDS. And it was presented at the last PCB meeting in December 2025 in Brazil. And thankfully, it was adopted by consensus by the members of the PCB and all the representatives of the PCB. But the subset of the member states on the PCB, of course, is 22 member states. And that's a relatively small subset compared to the 193 member states that are here in New York that will be engaging in the high-level meeting negotiations. And unlike the Global AIDS Strategy process, the text of the Global AIDS Strategy might have been developed based on inputs from communities and partners and evidence and data, but was presented and reviewed by the members of the PCB for the 2026 high-level meeting. And any high-level meeting, political declaration at the UN General Assembly, every word, every paragraph, every comma, every footnote is actually explicitly negotiated by member states here in New York. Do they want a long, very detailed political declaration like what we had in 2026? Or is it in 2021? Or is it going to be a very short political declaration that simply reaffirms and recommits the world to everything that was agreed on in 2021 and doesn't actually take on any new language or new commitments? It just extends them to 2030. That will all be determined in the negotiations that happen over the next few weeks. So it's an extremely important process. It's a little bit opaque. I think Leslie did an amazing job in opening up not only the timeline, but all the opportunities for advocacy and engagement that community representatives, people living with HIV, representatives of civil society and non-governmental organizations have to engage in the process. And we really encourage everyone to use all of those opportunities because, and this is kind of my last introductory point, there aren't formally non-government representatives of non-governmental organizations in the negotiating room. The process, as Leslie's correctly outlined, the two co-facilitators, Botswana and Georgia, are facilitating the negotiations, are shepherding the process. There are dozens of member states or delegations in the room in the negotiations, but the representatives of civil society and the representatives of non-governmental organizations are not formally in the room to be able to provide inputs into the negotiations. And so it's extremely important to know where those advocacy and influencing touch points are. It's extremely important to leverage each of those so that even when the zero draft comes out, likely in mid-May, you've already had extensive engagements with delegations that will be in the room, delegations that you might be a national of the country of one of the member states that are engaged in the negotiations, or might have a relationship with some of the other delegations, or directly with the co-facilitators. There's a number of different touch points. I won't take precious time now, but it's really important to remember that this is the opportunity to not wait until the political declaration is gavelled at the actual high-level meeting, the opportunities for engagement and to try and influence the process to protect language, to strengthen language is over the next few weeks, not at the actual high-level meeting itself. So I will cover just a few short introductory slides, but I'll keep this very, very short. So I've already mentioned how the high-level meeting is really a once in a 5-year opportunity, and it's really an opportunity to strengthen political leadership and accountability. And why is it called a high-level meeting? Because the expectation is that it specifically specifies, or will hopefully specifically specify this in the modalities resolution that was mentioned earlier, that participation in a high-level meeting is not only convened by the President of the General Assembly, will involve the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Executive Director of the United Nations. Extremely important for us at UNAIDS is the tradition for all previous high-level meetings, and we expect it to remain the same for this high-level meeting, is there will be the selection of a person openly living with HIV that speaks in the opening of the high-level meeting, in the opening session of the high-level meeting. And while this is we think it's kind of standard practice for high-level meetings on HIV and AIDS, it actually is quite exceptional and quite extraordinary in the UN General Assembly context, where you don't have the visibility of communities the same way that you have in a high-level meeting on HIV. Who is that person going to be? That will probably be a recommendation that comes from the task force that's already been established, and we're very pleased to know that GNP will be also playing a very active role in the task force and developing community recommendations, not only for the multi-stakeholder hearing, but for overall community participation in the high-level meeting itself. And then, of course, you'll see at the bottom here, sorry, I should have mentioned a moment ago, why is it called a high-level meeting? Because the representation of governments of countries is supposed to be done by heads of state and heads of government. It's not supposed to be just representatives of permanent missions here, although we have tremendous respect for the permanent missions here in New York, and they're the ones largely that are negotiating this, that will be negotiating the political declaration, have been engaged in negotiations on the modalities resolution, but it really is expected that the delegations to the actual high-level meeting will be led by heads of state or heads of government. And I'm sure we at UNAIDS and many of you on this call appreciate that getting the time and attention of heads of state and heads of government to the issue of HIV is difficult even once a year for World AIDS Day, let alone on an ongoing basis. So it's going to be a very important and challenging advocacy task to really mobilize the engagement of heads of state and heads of government to lead delegations to the high-level meeting themselves in person, and include in those delegations people living with HIV and representatives of communities. And then the actual political declaration, that's of course the political highlight, and kind of the purpose of a high-level meeting is to adopt a member state negotiated document that provides the new global accountability framework on HIV for the next 5 years. There is a formal input into the political declaration negotiations, which will be the Secretary General's report that has already been drafted. It's under final clearance with the Secretary General's office, and as soon as the Secretary General's annual report on HIV and AIDS to the UN General Assembly, we will make sure we share it with GNP and all of the partners on this call, and that will be used as a reference point, as well as the global AIDS strategy and other inputs into the political declaration. But a zero draft will be prepared by the co-facilitators insofar as they may welcome any inputs from UNAIDS. We're happy to provide them. And there will be a very intensive period of negotiations from the time the zero draft of the political declaration comes out all the way up to, and in recent years, it's even been up to the eve of, and in one occasion, even during the opening of the high-level meeting, where the negotiations were continuing because we weren't sure if we would have a political declaration that was agreed on under the silence procedure that Leslie mentioned earlier. So the core elements are for the high-level meeting are reinforcing global leadership. I've mentioned heads of state and heads of government. The key preparations are the modalities resolution. I'll just spend a couple more minutes on modalities in a moment. The Secretary General's report that I've mentioned, the multi-stakeholder hearing that tentatively is planned for the 14th of May, which I think is 3 weeks from today. So that doesn't give us a lot of time to prepare for the multi-stakeholder hearing or for the high-level meeting. So lots of work is going to happen in that space. And then the negotiations on the political declaration. And normally the zero draft of the political declaration comes out immediately after the multi-stakeholder hearing, because it's really important that the co-facilitators join the multi-stakeholder hearing and hear from stakeholders, from community representatives, from people living with HIV, what are your priorities? What are the priorities of community representatives in the context of the development of the zero draft of the political declaration, and then reflect on those and include those reflections in the zero draft of the political declaration. And then, of course, the HLM itself is not only supposed to take stock of what has happened over the last 5 years, it's supposed to set the direction for the next 5 years and hopefully include some language about the importance of sustaining the HIV response beyond 2030, because this is maybe the roadmap that is supposed to get the world and countries and communities to end AIDS by 2030. But we also know that there will be tens of millions of people living with HIV even after 2030. And it's extremely important to sustain the momentum, ensure continued support, services, inclusivity in all of the processes that even go beyond 2030. So just very quickly, highlight of some of the timelines that Leslie's already presented. So this is just a quick summary. The negotiations on the modalities resolution are ongoing now, and we expect them to be concluded really this week with the adoption of the modalities resolution. We're hoping on Friday afternoon at the UN General Assembly. Leslie made reference to the silence procedure. Silence was indeed broken by a number of different delegations earlier this week. And so we're not expecting necessarily that the modalities resolution will be adopted by consensus. It might be adopted more likely by a vote. But it's extremely important that even if it is adopted by a vote, that it sets out the timeline, because that timeline will be, when is the multi-stakeholder hearing going to happen? When is the actual high-level meeting going to happen? And then that sets our timeline for the negotiations on the political declaration. I've already mentioned the multi-stakeholder hearing. The language in the modalities resolution specifies that the multi-stakeholder hearing will be held in hybrid mode. Without pointing any fingers, I can just share with everyone on the call that not all member states support the idea of hybrid mode. Some of them said that the multi-stakeholder hearing needs to be only in person, and that hybrid mode will actually increase the digital divide. But thankfully, many other member states said, given some of the issues that have already been mentioned on this call around visas and the cost of traveling to New York, it's extremely important to have hybrid mode to ensure that community representatives, representatives of civil society can still join and be representative and speak at the multi-stakeholder hearing, even if they can't physically be here in New York. Then from mid-May until really up to the time of the high-level meeting, the negotiations on the political declaration, and then the modalities resolution should specify that the high-level meeting, the dates of the high-level meeting, which tentatively, as per the draft text of the modalities resolution, is the 22nd and 23rd of June. And the last point I'll make is there have been lots of discussions amongst member states, co-facilitators, OPGA, representatives of civil society about whether this timeline is too rushed, whether the June timeline for the high-level meeting is just unachievable. And after extensive discussions here in New York, I think the co-facilitators are feeling confident that it can still be landed within the 22nd, 23rd June timeline. Is it intensive? Yes. Does it give the normal 6 weeks for negotiations on the political declaration? No, it would only be actually five weeks for negotiations. But another major challenge is, of course, finding time in the UN-GA calendar for a high-level meeting. And we've confirmed that there are 2 days available in the GA calendar with all of the rooms that are required for a high-level meeting on the 22nd and 23rd of June. So despite some of the concerns around the compressed timeline, at least from the UN-AIDS side, we're confident that this timeline can work, even though it's only a few weeks away. So in the interest of time, Inad, I will stop there. I will stop sharing my screen. And happy to pause for any questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vinay. Do we have questions? No, thank you for that for the information. Very useful. I have taken down some notes. But before I kind of like ask my own question, I'd like to ask the participants if you have questions that you want to ask either Leslie, Mina, or Vinay. I think someone raised their hand earlier. Was it Lois? So while waiting for the questions from the participants, my question is for the high-level meeting milestones and timelines. Do we know which of these milestones are not really controlled, but in the hands of the member states, and which of these milestones are controlled by the UN system, and like, can we identify which where the community or the PLHIV influence can actually matter the most?
Sure, I'm happy to take that on first, Inad. So it's a little bit of a combination of both, but the real determination around the timeline and the milestones for that timeline, it is controlled by the member states, because it's the member states that agree on the modalities resolution. So the member states need to adopt the modalities resolution that sets out the timeline for the next few weeks from now until the high-level meeting. We're expecting that this modalities resolution will be adopted tomorrow by the UN General Assembly, and then the schedule for the negotiations, of course, between the member states is really managed by the two co-facilitators. They will set out the timeline for, I mean, modalities already sets out the timeline for the multi-stakeholder hearing, which tentatively is the 14th of May, for the actual high-level meeting on the 22nd and 23rd of June. And then according to a schedule that they will keep the member states here in New York informed of almost on a weekly basis, they will set out the timeline for the actual negotiations in that process.
Okay, thank you, Vinay. I still have my questions, but I'll give the floor to Emily, who raised her hand. You can unmute yourself and you can ask your question. Emily?
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you. As Malawi, CSOs, we are planning to meet to get inputs into the high level for the high level meeting. I don't know. Have heard the UNAIDS, and we are also discussing this under GNP Plus. When we get these inputs, should we send them to the UNAIDS as Malawi? I'm from Malawi. Malawi, or this should be sent to GNP Plus, so that really we see that our inputs are incorporated into the high level meeting. And if yes, when do you think what are the timelines like? When do you, at what point, or what the dates that we can submit so that we don't miss that? Thank you.
Inad, would you like me to take that question on now?
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And I think Florence can also respond after Vinay. Okay, Vinay, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. Excellent question. I think there's a number of different entry points. First of all, hats off to you and the community in Malawi for engaging in this process very early. And this is a bit of a moving target because the negotiations are going to move fast. They might not necessarily always go in a positive direction. There will be a number of bumps in the road. And so it's not just providing an additional set of inputs as to what are the community asks or inputs into the high level meeting. There might be an opportunity there might be rather a need for you to reconvene maybe more than once over the next few weeks to say, oh, now this issue has come up and that issue has come up. So what's our position on this? My informal, unofficial recommendation on behalf of UNAIDS is if you have a mechanism to provide those inputs to the government of Malawi, to the Ministry of Health of Malawi, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Malawi, with the very clear request that you know that Malawi has a delegate in the room in New York that's actually part of these negotiations. And we still haven't gotten to the point in the negotiations where the negotiations start on the political declaration. Right now, the negotiations are still been on the modalities resolution. In past years, all member states are, of course, welcome in the room, but the actual negotiations from the so-called Africa group, from all the countries, the dozens of countries that are part of the Africa group here in New York, they usually select one negotiator to represent the common position from all the representatives of the Africa group. So we don't know who that is yet. We will find out in the next few weeks when the negotiations on the political declaration start. But it's still important to make sure that whatever inputs Malawi or Kenya or Zimbabwe or Uganda or South Africa are provided first and foremost to your country's delegation, because they have a seat in the room. They have an opportunity to directly influence the text. and to consider, oh, these are citizens of Malawi or citizens of Kenya or citizens of Tanzania that have provided these inputs, and therefore we need to find a way of reflecting these inputs in the position that Malawi is taking in the negotiations. Of course, there's a number of other opportunities, but I'll leave it to Florence and team to comment on how inputs provided to GNP can then be shared through the multi-stakeholder task force and through the other processes for the high-level meeting. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Vinay. Thank you so much for so much learning in this process as well, and for giving us all the updates and being very frank with what looks like a looming mountain climb for the next few months. But I think we are here for it. Emily, thank you for your leadership in Malawi and your very critical question. I think one thing is the presentation that Leslie made had a lot of tools that could be useful with templates of letters and how to frame different messages for different people. So that could be something we can talk about. And at the end of this call, we will definitely follow up with the link of this recording, but also with how you can stay in touch with us. We will share a Google Doc for how to give us any other comments and content that you would like us to take with us into the multi-stakeholder hearing and into the engagement with GNP+. But because I know you're very connected with the UN AIDS in Malawi, I would like to also ask that you stay connected with them and through them the RST and be able to get to different people with the same message, and hopefully it will land. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I guess the approach will be multifaceted, and it will take different lines of connections. So from what Bini has mentioned, going straight or working directly with the country delegations, we should know who our country delegates are. In some countries, working with country delegations may not work, so we might have to explore another option or another line of connections, which is through your networks or through UNAIDS. We are very happy to support to carry the messaging as well of the PLHIVs in the high-level meeting discussions. In the interest of time, thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you so much, Vinay. If there are more questions to Leslie and Vinay, you can send your emails. I'm happy to facilitate the question and answer through email. But thank you so much, Leslie and Vinay, for joining us, for providing those very useful information. The link in the toolkit is on the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Now let's move to the next segment of the convening. We're going to go through the key messages for PLHIVs, or the priorities and ask for among people living with HIV in the high-level meeting. And like Nina, Vinay, Leslie, you're welcome to join us moving forward. But Cedric, I'll give you the floor. Let me just put your slides on the screen, and then give me some minute. Okay, over to you, Cedric.
Thank you so much, Enad. But maybe before even I start, let me thank Leslie for the presentation, as always on our side, and on also raising the voice of the PLHIV communities, but also working so hard to get things very clearly. Thank you so much, Leslie. And Vinay, I took personal all the statement and commitment, but also the appreciation for GNP Plus, and thank you so much. I cannot even imagine how early it is where you are, and then you are here, and you sound like fresh. It's every morning, but I know it's not like an easy task to wake up, but also show the support, and really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I have an important task to give a feedback, but also which I think I will call a compilation of messages and asks that have been shared by the networks. would like not to brag, but I cannot help myself. This is a process that have started like a year ago now, and to build these messages, but also to for us to be here today thinking about the high-level meeting on HIV in 2026. It started very early last year. I'm going to give you what I would think is a summary of the asks, but also what we think are our offer. And you can consider our offer as the constituting the core strategy of what people living HIV can do to address our needs on up to 2030. But briefly, what I'm going to share is the asks that has been formulated through the various documentation, but also consultation discussions. Next slide, Enid. And before I go to the ask, I want to maybe for those who still don't remember where our ask where are they coming from? It's not just like one person who sat down and then start drafting the ask. They stem from different documentation I just shared, but also some of the most important documents like the UNAIDS Global AIDS Strategy. I want to recall the first discussion we had about the high level meeting was last year in April in Nairobi during the PLHIV HIV Leadership Summit, which had roughly like 80 participants, 18 network coming from 80 participants, and we had 18 networks of people living HIV, but also different partners and UNAIDS, WHO, Global Fund, but also the support from AIDS funds and support from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Netherlands. After that, we did a comparative analysis of the, people living with HIV involvement into the development of the roadmap, HIV response, HIV sustainability roadmap development for 9 countries. We did this since the process was started also last year, but we published our report sometime in the Q3 2025. And at the end of the year, if you can recall, we published the people living HIV minimum requirement for integrated HIV services. This was a study that was done online, but also through an online convenings, but also online survey, which had like 1,800 people responded to this with a very consistent messaging around what integration means for people living with HIV moving forward. And then, of course, last but not least, the UNAIDS Global AIDS Strategy that was recently published, and they had a massive consultation. Vina has already mentioned this, in which we had a very important participation, but input into the strategy itself. So these are the core bases where we took the messaging that I'm going to share later on, which we believe are the voice of people living HIV. But before I go there, next slide, Enid. I want also to remind everyone that since the moment we did the PLHIV Leadership Summit, we started doing more on this online convening. In the beginning, Florence had mentioned that this is 23rd time that we're doing the online convening, but also we launched the various podcasts with different people living HIV leaders sharing their experiences from the country perspective, but also from what they hear from the peers. I'm gonna pause here a bit. If you haven't already had a chance to listen to the podcast, you can use this QR code. Technology has facilitated us to do things quickly, and then you can land on where the podcasts are hosted, and then later on after the conversation you can still have listen to the podcast. They really provide all the details. Probably what I'm going to share today is a summary, but you can also podcasts are very useful when you're doing your work or when you're doing other things. You can still listen to the various voices that we really still appreciate until now. Again, this is one of also the source of the brief messages or the asks that we have tried to formulate, and we don't take this as a GNP plus only voice, but this is people living HIV voices, and we want to make sure that we are not failing the people that trust in the leadership of GNP plus. Next slide. Then again, as we did this exercise a little bit earlier, and we have been trying to come up with what we can call a briefing matrix for our advocacy. What we've done here is taking stock of the 2021 political declaration and analyzing the current global AIDS strategy targets, and then develop these messages from the sources I just shared with you. We've done this to make sure that we use a framework that align both our ask but also the commitment that has been already there. So we are not doing things out of context, but we're also trying to follow a clear framework through which we can also articulate our messages, our ask, and also offer, which I can say, remind you, we constitute our core strategy in terms of what we want to advocate for in the next 5 years. This document will be available. I only took a screenshot, which means this is one part of the advocacy briefing matrix that we developed at the GNP Plus level. But later on, actually, shortly, I'm going to share with you the messages that we developed. But I wanted only to share how did we come up with this message and in which context, but also what has been the process of analyzing and getting to these messages. Next slide. What are then those asks and how are they organized? So first of all, we have identified 5 core areas in which we believe they are very important for people living with HIV, and our asks are framed into these 5 areas: treatment, access, and innovation. Of course, what can we do without treatment? But again, reminding everyone, which I think need to be the core of the advocacy that we do, is the GPA principle, the greater involvement of people living with HIV, which is the second area we believe that need to be very well reflected in the political declaration. Thirdly, prevention, PMTCT, prevention to from mother to child and pediatrics. Not only we are parents, but also we know that pediatric is one of the one of the people that are still really lagging behind in terms of the HIV response, and then we cannot leave them behind. We are the voice of those young and children. Definitely, the fourth area is stigma and discrimination. This is no secret to anyone. We cannot talk about ending AIDS if stigma and discrimination are still around, preventing people to get, their services, their treatment, but testing. Stigma and discrimination is one of the barrier that beyond financing, we cannot really end AIDS without tackling it. And then last but not least, integration. It's the I don't want to say it's the new norm, but this is where we're heading, and this is also what we are asking. We did the survey, and then we have a lot of things that we can say about the integration of HIV, because the voices and the data we collected can speak more than I can do. But what I need to say is that integration is one of the 4 core areas that we believe are much important to be reflected, and also we need to based on which our messaging and ask have been formulated. So I'm going to go into the messaging they ask themselves, which I have to admit we try to summarize, but also to be as much clear as possible. And then we'll be happy to hear your feedback at later stage in terms of whether you still believe these are. We do know that they came from the documentation, the voices that we collected from the different reports. But we also feel like it's still important that we stay together into this process and then keep reminding each other what is important. So the next slide is the first area of the ask. You can move on. Treatment, access, innovation. There are four things. And what I like about this is that there's nothing I believe we all agree on this ask. Probably we are missing some, maybe the formulation may not be the way that everyone like it, but there are four things that we think under treatment, access, innovation are paramount for people living HIV. Access to treatment and viral suppression, which are very key should we want to live longer. And also non-interruption to access to treatment. We saw what happened last year, and then I don't think we really want to make sure that in the commitment, it's fairly reflected that the interruption, or probably the access to treatment, should be one of the key responsibilities of any given country to their citizens, and that we cannot rely on. We could or we can rely on external funding, but they should not be an issue at any point of time, funding or not funding. Interruption is something we don't want to hear again for any reason. And thirdly is the decades of advocacy on U equals U, but we think we need to go to another level. Treatment, people who are virally suppressed and taking that treatment, we know very well they cannot transmit the message. And this is something that goes beyond access to treatment, but also into prevention itself, into stigma and discrimination. We believe that if you talk about treatment, we have to keep reminding people these are, when people access treatment, there is a benefit, prevention, but also stigma and discrimination. And then the fourth ask under treatment and innovation is the things that probably we don't talk so much often, the cure and the vaccine. We have, and we really need to make sure that in the next 5 years, the investing into new technologies, the long-acting treatment, but also in vaccine and the cure research are very important to end AIDS. I'm going to move to the second area, which is the JIPA principle. As I mentioned before, we have various asks here, but the most important is that as we are now sure that the networks, the communities on the ground are key into service delivery, into advocacy, into policy development. We have to institutionalize the people living HIV leadership. We don't want to be only seen as, yes, partners which need to be funded by external or other funding, but the government need to really institutionalize the leadership of communities and think about how can we work with the networks of people living with HIV and the community leaders into ending AIDS. We're lucky we have, again, in the strategy, the 30, 60, 80 target that was in the previous mentioned clearly in the previous political declaration, and we want this to come back, but also moving forward, we want to see this very much materialized through the institutionalization of people living HIV leadership. And then the moving from institutionalization, we want to go into funding, resourcing the people living HIV community system through possibly social contracting as one of the element that could really help the government to fund the networks, but also the networks to operate as part of one of the pillars into the HIV response, not merely depending on external support. I have two other asks under the JIPA principle, if you could go to the next slide. is we have CCMs as one of the very successful mechanisms in which we have government and communities working together to plan, develop, and agree on key priorities at the country level. We think this type of mechanism need to evolve and then need to be taken as an example and then to be legally formalized at country level, so that if in the next 5 years most of the countries are now talking about the transitions of the global fund. We don't want to hear that the CCM, are now disappearing because the global fund is no longer in the country. They have to be, legally now recognized and then be part of the mechanism in terms of responding, the HIV response at the country level. And as probably I would say, the last but not least important point is the decision making of the HIV response need to take into consideration the communities, people living in HIV networks. We talked about the institutionalization as one of element, and we want to go beyond institutionalization. Institutionalization could also mean, just so that it's also maybe to differentiate here, it could mean that networks are part of the service delivery, policy development, but the decision making is an important element that we believe could elevate the voice, but also put much better the possibility of reaching the 2060-80 target of community leadership. I'm going to move to the third area, which is prevention, PMTCT, mother to child transmission and pediatrics. I say this is one of the things that whoever is working in the HIV response, we always I think I would say it's even sad to see that this is the area that has very much less support, I would say, or maybe not support, result in terms of pediatrics. And then we want to see a commitment to closing all the treatment gap for children. It's so sad to see that, everywhere else we are progressing, doing well, but into pediatrics, we are not doing well at all. Something better need to be done. And then we believe that closing the treatment gap and, optimize pediatric formulation and lifelong care, it must be committed through the political declaration. And moving to the treatment gap, but also going into more comprehensive care for children. We believe this is not, yes, when we make it for the children to survive and get the treatment, the burden become a little bit much difficult for the caregivers if the life of these children are not fully kind of supported throughout, because educational, social, psychological, it's much more harder for the children born with HIV. And GNP Plus has been a champion, but also part of the conveners of the Global Alliance for Children to End AIDS, for Global Alliance to End AIDS in Children. And we believe that this need to be much more elevated to the at political level to see to enable also this commitment to be implemented at the country level. We need a high level political space in which we have to push for the commitment on behalf of children. And the fourth area, bear with me, this is before the last one, is stigma and discrimination. I said this before. I don't think it needs much more explanation, but we want commitment, like strong commitment on eliminating stigma and discrimination, and also coming up with legal instruments that tackle stigma and discrimination, not exacerbate stigma and discrimination, including, we don't want here again people being criminalized because they're HIV positive or they did not disclose. We want to use the tools like U to tackle stigma and discrimination. And the second thing about stigma and discrimination is to use the evidence to such as stigma index, one of the powerful tool that GNP Plus use to produce data and information on stigma and discrimination. And to have this very much recognized so that the country also knows that there are tools that they can use to come up with adequate law and policies that really remove stigma and discrimination. The last, as I said, not the least, is the HIV integration, integration of HIV into HIV services and health system strengthening. There's so much we can say, but and we also know that most of the countries they are trying this, and people, also the communities. Some of us are like, we need this. Some of us are like very reluctant in terms of the HIV, the integration, but we cannot avoid this to happen. On the long run, this will have to happen, but on what cost? And we want to formulate this in a way that the government also understand that the integration is a solution, but it has to be a solution that works for everyone. So we rely very much on the primary requirement, the minimum requirement that we have published, and we want to really use this as a benchmark for any country that is moving into the integration, to say, hey, this is what people are saying. Please look at this instrument and use them, these requirements, so that they can serve as a standard in the integration process. And then lastly, community integration. The integration is not possible if we are not really much engaged. This is linked to the deeper principle. It has, we know that it's going to be in different fields, but the principle has worked in the HIV response, and we want to see this community engagement being part of the system, the integration process. Community engagement, I mean that counting on community, people living HIV community into the integration process. So these are the five asks, I would say. And then, as I say in the beginning, we don't, if you talk about the deeper principle, you need to understand that the greater involvement of people living with HIV is not only about asking, it's also about doing. And we know that we have proven very much, I don't think this is something we need to discuss more, but we believe that even if we have things to ask, we also have things to offer. And when we talk about offer, in our case, we are thinking about our core strategy in terms of responding and intervening in the next 5 years. I will go into what we are offering briefly. Bear with me. I'm just going to take 5 minutes. So in terms of treatment, again, we want to we are using the 5 area to not only to do our ask, but also to offer our what is our contribution as people living with HIV. So championing self-care, testing and adherence, this has been done the last 40 years. The access to services, to testing, treatment has been done through the demand creation, the raising awareness from people living with HIV. It's not something new, and I believe that we want to continue doing that. And then I think everyone will join me on this. We have been using our life experience to shape policies, but also to tell the government, any stakeholders, this is how things need to be done should you want to respond to the needs of people living with HIV. And we think both our life experience, but also our approach in terms of demand creation, peer support are very useful, and we want to commit again to continue doing that should the government really want to implement, reach the 40 million target that we want to reach by 2030. Next slide. In terms of the deeper principle, I think we have proven ourselves, and then we'll continue to do so in terms of providing consistently right-based and community response, but also while we try to build the next generation This is very important, and the involvement. We don't want to hold the spaces, but also we don't want to leave any gap. We believe that any great leadership have to count into how do we prepare the next generation. And I believe that we've been doing this very well in the last couple of years. The next slide, which is again, what do we offer in terms of PMTCT? I don't think we can offer more than our voice, but also our dedication. Really speaking on behalf of the children, and making sure that the treatment gap are being highlighted in all our advocacy efforts. And we also think that, as I was saying previously in terms of leadership, handing over, also preparing the next generation of leaders, building the capacity of our peers in terms of care of the young ones, the children, and also making sure that, collaborating with the government to support the parent and caregivers through peer support or advocacy program. This is part of the things we already do, and I believe we are still committed to do so. The next slide, for the stigma and discrimination, we have the most useful tool that we've been using for the last, if I'm not mistaken, almost 10 years, the stigma index, and it has proven to be one of the two, and the government, we have, this has been done in more than 100 countries, and with 100,000 people living HIV being interviewed or interviewing other people living HIV, and produced a lot of information and data that has been used by the Global Fund or any other donor country to plan HIV programs. And we think our offer is to continue really working and updating these tools so that they can remain relevant, but also updated to respond to the actual needs of the country. U equals U. I said before, and I think that 2 years now, GNP Plus and the communities, U equals U has been one of the movement that really gathered people living HIV, but throughout there has not really transcended into country policies as much as we wish it could, and we want to offer our dedication to this movement, and very much and intentionally trying to influence the narrative about U equals U. It's in some instances, U equals U has been very badly, I would say, interpreted, but we want to use it as a wonderful tool to promote treatment access, but also to fight stigma and discrimination. And then again, next slide, Enid. In terms of integration, this is my before last slide. It's not a new field, but we also know that in some cases, also in most of the government, engaging people living with HIV or the community at large is going to be much more needed. And we want to be to commit ourselves into a very strategic engagement with government and partners, and using the information, collecting the information, but also guide into this process. I say it's a new, somehow new-ish way of doing, and then we want to be there, not only because we have to, but also because we believe that it will be helpful for the government to receive our guidance as we very much showcase what is needed from our side. And then lastly, I think we want to use our realities and experience, but also produce as much evidence as possible to make sure that integration is successful. Like it or not, integration is happening, but it also it's somehow new, as I said, and we have to be there as leaders, as service receivers, but also as those who take care of children. So I want to finish by thanking everyone for your attention and saying that we'll come back on this, but if there's any question or any comment, any addition into this GNP Plus asks and offers, we'll be very much happy to hear your feedback. And if not here, we'll also come back with more with other tools probably to input or improve the messaging. And I thank you. Back to you, Inat.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Those are very rich and well articulated asks and offers of the HIV community and HIV leaders for the high level meeting. We are going back to our networks and to our HIV leaders. We will be asking for your feedback. Do we have time now? We don't want to do it now, no? But we will be reaching out sorry. My cat is sick. Say hi. But we will be reaching out to you to gather your feedback on what you think should be highlighted more, and what are the gaps and what should be what we can highlight more in the asks and in the offers. Before we close, I'd like to thank Vinay, Leslie, Mina for the very wonderful and very articulated and detailed presentations on the information of the NCD toolkit, for sharing us the updates on the high level meeting, the political opportunities and engagements for the people living with HIV, leaders and networks, and also, of course, for the engagements of our PLHIV friends here in the convening, for your comments and questions on the PLHIV asks and priorities. Florence, would you like to say something before we close?
Yes, I would. I see one anonymous question to Cedric. It's from Lois Maturu asking, can you confirm you mentioned HIV and mental services, health services integration? Yes, indeed, we did. And there are indicators within the current targets for UNAIDS, not really, under the Global AIDS Strategy. And I believe those will be included in the GAM that, yes, are meant to measure targets for integrating HIV and mental health services. But the tool that also shared, Leslie shared that they have worked on at NCD Alliance has very clear messaging and narrative around this. Thank you, Inad, and thanks to everyone who's joined this call. It's been me listening and looking at these messages and hearing the different comments coming from you guys already, and feeling the energy of this moment. I think a lot is happening and a lot is going on, and we are at GNP Plus very keen right now to come back to the core purpose of a global network of people living with HIV. Our primary job is to secure treatment access, viral suppression, and quality of life for all people living with HIV, as this is the only pathway we have to contributing towards HIV epidemic control. We don't have any other way. And whereas maybe previously we've been distracted and diverted in different ways and following the money and following where the projects take us, I believe now as leaders, we owe it to the community that we represent, to the 40 million people living with HIV, 9 million of who do not still have access to treatment, the many that may have been lost up in care due to the disruptions last year, the many people living with HIV who have yet to even be able to understand how they could benefit from the science of U equals U because they are not virally suppressed. The 680,000 people that continue to die every year, we must go back to the core business of a network of people living with HIV. We remain here to work with you. We are grateful to the leadership of UNAIDS and other UN co-sponsors that are working diligently to make sure that we gather the political commitment needed to take us to the next 5 years. And we will be here with our energy and excitement and our powerful lives and stories to work alongside you. Thank you all, and wishing you a great, great week ahead.
Thank you, Florence. For everyone, let's continue to show up with purpose, with compassion, and with quiet confidence that our leadership, the PLHIV leadership, can strengthen the PLHIV response. We walk into the HLM not as observers, but as leaders, and we do so with dignity, solidarity, and unwavering belief that we continue to move this movement forward. Thank you so much. You will be hearing a lot from me, and I will be getting your feedback by email. Thank you so much, and have a nice weekend. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.